Alright everyone, so let's continue my Exorcist franchise reviews with The Exorcist 3, which is also known as Legion, which was based on the book Legion, which is technically a sequel to the first Exorcist. And I have not read either books, The Exorcist 1 or Legion, but I know for a fact that the movie and the book, both of them are kind of disconnected, except for this theatrical cut, which includes an exorcism at the end, but it was originally not supposed to be that, and the book is basically, from what I've heard, just the character Kinderman returns from the first movie, so it's not like it's really a sequel to The Exorcist. It's not a true sequel, as opposed to this theatrical cut of this, where they have the exorcism in it. But The Exorcist 3, the theatrical cut, and I'm going to talk about the director's cut in another video, but the theatrical cut of The Exorcist 3 is very interesting to me, because even though I haven't read the book, I can tell the difference in what they did to the movie. Because, like I said, they add an exorcism at the end of this movie, which is not what the book, from what I've heard, did have at all. Like, it had nothing to do with exorcisms. It was just the Kinderman character returns from the first movie and the first book. So it's not really a true sequel to The Exorcist. But after Exorcist 2 came along, we got this because of the poor negative reception to Exorcist 2, which makes me sad. But honestly, just like the first two movies, I love this movie just as much as the first two. I think this is a fantastic trilogy. I think that this one in particular, the theatrical cut, like, it still, to me, is incredible in a lot of ways. And again, I didn't read the book Legion. I don't know and I've seen the director's cut, so I know that there's a difference that feels more like the book, but I don't know the differences between the actual novel and the movie. But I really love this movie. This is really incredibly underrated. I feel like it's because Exorcist 2 was so hated that whenever this came out, people were like, oh, it's better than the second one. But I feel like people should give this more credit, because this movie honestly is truly terrifying in a lot of ways, with a fantastic performance from George C. Scott, who is just one of the best actors I've ever seen. Like, he's one of my favorite actors that I've seen. Everything I've seen him in, like, he has blown me away, and this is no exception. Again, since I love this movie so much, I'm going to kind of go through the plot. Things I love about it. I don't really hate anything about this movie at all. I can point out weird things about it, the theatrical cut, but I don't really dislike anything about this movie. I think this movie is so entertaining, so scary, such great performances. So starting out, we got this great creepy open, which harkens back to the first Exorcist movie. But this time it's got an empty church where it's got all these statues, the Virgin Mary, the Jesus statue on the cross, and the doors blast open and this wind blows in. And whenever that happens, the Jesus statue literally opens up his eyes, wind blows at him, and then he starts bleeding out of the thing on his head that he gets crushed with. Or the thorn halo on his head. And it is a beautiful image, and that is really a creepy, great way to start this, just like the first movie. That's really cool, and really, again, it's doing the same kind of thing as the first one, but that's awesome. I love that opening. That's really cool. And then we get the character Kinderman back, who after the first movie, like, he was played by another guy in the first movie who was terrific as well. I love the guy who played him in the first Exorcist movie. But in this one, he truly, like, George C. Scott is just incredible in this movie. Every single line he says, he's got such a presence. He is one of those actors where you can listen to him read the phone book. He's that good. Like, you can listen to him say anything, and he's just that much of a great actor. Like, he's incredible. I really think, and this is one of, I don't know if, I haven't seen all his movies. I haven't even seen close to all his movies. And I want to see more of him because he's great. But in this movie, I think this is one of my favorite performances of his I've seen so far. And I've seen other things with him in it, but I just feel like this really did blow me away. He is great in this movie. He's got so much range for playing this simple character. On paper, this is a very simple character, but he gives off such an incredible performance and charisma that I feel like he makes this character so much better. Even though the character's finely written, I just mean, like, this character is quote unquote more simple. Like he's just this detective trying to figure out what's going on, but George C. Scott gives it so much emotion and depth to it, and I feel like it amplifies the already good writing for this character. Like George C. Scott is incredible in this movie. I love that. And I love that this movie starts out with, it's 15 years after the first movie. And it says online that they ignore Exorcist 2. Like on Wikipedia it says, yeah, and it completely ignores Exorcist 2, but it's called Exorcist 3, and they did point out on IMDb that, I noticed this rewatching this, that whenever you see somebody falling down the stairs, and it's not Karras, it's like a new scene added in to this movie, whenever the person falls down the stairs, the camera is tilted in a way where you can't see on the right of the screen when they fall down, which on the right of the screen was the MacNeil House, so you can't see it, because in Exorcist 2, the house was destroyed. So I feel like that doesn't contradict Exorcist 2. Like, it still exists, but they don't want to mention it, but it still exists in the universe, I guess. That's pretty cool. I just noticed that, and I noticed whenever I saw that on IMDb, it said they tilt the camera, or the angle it so interestingly to where you can't see on the other side of this cement, up top of this cement ground, where the house was. So it still could be considered in canon that Exorcist 2 exists in this movie. It's just, they say online that they ignore it, but I feel like they don't if they don't show the house, and they angle it to where they don't purposefully show it, because it got destroyed in the last movie. I think that actually makes logical sense. And I love how this movie, like the second one, follows another set of characters from the first movie. Like Exorcist 2 followed Reagan, Marin, and Sharon, and somebody else. But focused on those group of people in Exorcist 2. In this one, it is Kinderman and Karras and Father Dyer. And I like how they do that, where they connect. I mean, like how the first movie had all these characters, then the second movie had half of the characters, and the third movie had the other half. Like, that's really cool. That actually makes it a really cool trilogy, whether you like the second one or not, or even this one. Some people hate this movie too, but I think I love all three. But I like how this trilogy is really interesting, and how it focuses on, in 2 and 3, it focuses on half of the characters in one and half in the other one. That's really cool. But it's been exactly 15 years since the first movie, where Father Karras died, sacrificed himself to free Reagan. But also, it's the 15th anniversary of the Gemini Killer. So I love that cool connection, because it plays out in the plot really in a cool way. But I like how it starts with that, and I like how it just starts with having Kinderman just talking about his life. Like, this Kinderman character is so interesting because George C. Scott makes it so, and the writing is great. And I like how he talks to Father Dyer. Oh yeah, to Father Dyer from the first movie too. He talks to Father Dyer about this kid Thomas who was killed. And this is the first death that we hear of. We don't see any deaths in this movie, which is really interesting. I love the fact that this movie is so... This is one of the perfect examples of a horror movie that doesn't show anything, but it is still terrifying. Whenever Kinderman sees Thomas for the first time, like his dead body, he's covered up. You don't see him get killed. And then they describe in detail what happened to Thomas, and the writing and how they describe these murders is scary. That's why they're so scary, even though they're not shown on screen. And William Peter Blatty, who wrote the book, literally wrote and directed this movie, so that's really cool. That's really, really awesome that he actually worked on this movie and did everything he could to make it just like his novel. Like, I mean, not everything, because this theatrical cut has the exorcism at the end, which is not in the book, apparently. But the descriptive violence, talking about how Thomas is killed, is really scary. They talk about how this little kid was mutilated and murdered and mutilated, and then crucified on oars. Like, that is scary. That is, and again, it's just describing it. It's not showing it. I love that. And then we get the second murder where they talk about this guy was paralyzed and had slow asphyxiation and died from that. And again, the way that they describe, and I'll keep talking about these murders too, because they keep getting more and more creepy, and the writing is incredible. Just telling how, and not showing, telling how these characters die. It is really scary. Man, I got the coughs today. Sorry guys, I'm under a little bit of a cold. Not too bad, but just, you might hear coughing every once in a while. But then we get to this awesome scene where Kinderman has this dream, because he goes to bed, and he has this dream of heaven, where, funny enough, he sees all these angels and people descending, coming from heaven, or coming to heaven. Like, it's kind of at the halfway point from heaven and earth, and the angels are kind of pulling people in and telling them they can go ahead. And you know who makes a cameo in this? Funny enough, and he even has a line. It's Samuel L. Jackson as this blind guy. That's really cool. And I wouldn't have noticed that unless I looked it online, because he doesn't, like, he's younger. He's wearing black eyeglasses, so his eyes are covered, so you wouldn't be able to tell it's him. And it's not like close up; it's kind of at a distance. But that's cool. He has a cameo in this movie. I really thought that was awesome to see him in this. And I wouldn't notice. I just looked on IMDb one day at his films, and he was in this, and I was like, who is he? Like, oh yeah, he's the guy who was the angel who was blind, or the guy who was blind that was going to heaven. And I love how Kinderman in this dream sees Thomas, who was killed, and I love how he says this line, because it's so dreamlike, where Kinderman says to Thomas, he grabs his hand and holds it, and he says, "I'm so sorry that you were killed, Thomas." And then Thomas is like, "It's okay." And then Kinderman's like, "I miss you." And he's like, "I miss you too." Like, that line, if it wasn't in like a dream, it would have been weird, but I felt like that worked really well, where it's not a normal way people speak, but I thought that worked in the dream. Or even if maybe it isn't a dream, because he actually might have saw Thomas. Like, God, maybe it was like seeing beyond Earth thing. And funny enough, after he has that dream, the next day Father Dyer dies. So it connects to that dream. And like, it coincides with it. And I love how this is, again, another fantastically creepy way of describing how this guy dies. Father Dyer, they describe about how the killer drained all his entire blood supply, no drops. It literally was perfect, where he drained it all, put him in all these cups. They were just sat there, and everybody found him in there, just dead, with all his blood drained from his body completely. Again, just describing that is scarier than seeing it. I love that. That is incredible. I love that. And not a drop of the blood is spilled. Like, that line is awesome. And then they find on the board there is blood on it that says "It's a Wonderful Life," which is what they were talking about before, because Kinderman and Dyer went and saw "It's a Wonderful Life" earlier. so that was really cool. And I liked how whenever there's a great scene with Kinderman talking to patients, like, it's just him talking to all these patients, these catatonics here. And I love this scene where there's this one woman who is, of course, messed up. Like, she's got something up with her. And he comes in and talks to her, and she's like, "Can you fix my radio?" And, like, she's obviously imagining she's got a radio, but she doesn't have one physically. And he says, "Yeah, can I see it?" And she's like, "You're looking at it right now." And she has her hands out. And he said, "Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I can. I'm the radio guy. I'm the guy who can fix the radio." And I love this reaction to her, because she just says, "I knew you weren't a radio technician, because this is a telephone in my hand." And he just gives a look like he doesn't know what to say, but I love her reaction. Like, this, it's just a great scene. I love that scene. And then I love how she says to him, like, "You've got a kind face." Like, it just plays into these characters. Like, lines like that make these characters so likable and so interesting, and you can tell it comes from a writer of books, William Peter Blatty. You can obviously tell it comes from him, because it's so well written. And then we get the first scene where they talk about the Hedge Trimmers, which are really important to this movie. I love this use of this weapon in this movie, and it's not even shown. And these Hedge Trimmers are freaky looking. Like, this is a cool, creepy weapon, and the way they describe how these Hedge Trimmers are used, because they've got a gear in them where they will snap up and not open up. Like, they will lock into each other. So the guy during an autopsy with Kinderman shows him like how it works with the Hedge Trimmers, and you see him try to open it up, then they slam shut and they can't open again. That is creepy. If they shut, you're gone. Like you're like whatever's in there is gone, cut apart. And it plays into the end of the movie, which I love. Those Hedge Trimmers, just one of the coolest, creepiest weapons that is not shown actually killing somebody on screen, but it is great. I love that. And I love then how we get completely introduced to Patient X, who claims that he is the Gemini killer, but he also claims that he is Father Karras, since both of these coincide with 15 years ago, anniversary of both of these happening, of Gemini killer being killed and Karras being killed. And I really think that's really just, that's really just a cool thing to do with these two, with connecting Karras with this Gemini killer. That's a cool way to bring him back. And honestly, like, it's fine in the theatrical cut, but it is so neutered. Like, I watched the director's cut today as well, and you can't not watch the director's cut and not get, because that has some incredible scenes with Brad Dourif in this movie. And Brad Dourif's great in the theatrical cut of this, but there are some flat-out incredible scenes that were butchered and gone from the theatrical cut of this movie, which you have to see the theatrical cut. That's why I have to talk about it in another video, because it's too much to talk about in one. But I love Brad Dourif in this movie. This is one of his best performances. He is incredible. He is terrifying. Especially in the director's cut. The director's cut has so many scenes of him that you don't see in the actual cut, which are scary. And then we get to one of the best jump scares that I have ever seen, honestly. And that's why, another reason to love this movie, for me personally, that jump scare of the nurse inside the hospital, where you spend 5 minutes of her walking around. She jumps and freaks out because she walks into a room with the patient in there, and the patient's like, "Why don't you let me sleep?" She walks out. It takes so much time. It's only 5 minutes, but it takes its time so incredibly well, where she's walking around, just walking. You know something is going to happen. And it's perfect, that shot, where the camera is all in the back room, so it's showing her far away. She walks on this side of the screen, starts walking out, and then somebody with the Hedge Trimmers is right here, just rocking right there, and it zooms in on the camera with her, like, with the person walking behind her. That is one of the best jump scares I've ever seen. I keep jumping every time I see it, no matter what. That is such an incredible scene. I love it so much. And again, it takes like 5 minutes for it to happen, which, again, is such an incredible build-up. And then they describe her death afterward again, which is scary, where they say she was cut open and her vital organs were removed, and then she was stuffed with Catholic rosaries and stitched back up. Like that, again, the way they describe these murders are scarier than seeing them. I love that incredible writing, just incredible. I love it so much. I also love whenever Kinderman figures out, because he has conversations with Patient X about how he's a traveling man, which makes more sense when you realize what he means. And he means traveling man, in which he possesses the catatonics to murder people. So he's just there while he is letting them he's possessing somebody to do something. And after he figures this out, this older woman who lives in the hospital literally runs out with those Hedge Trimmers, goes to Kinderman's house to go and kill Julie, his daughter, and his wife, and Julie, and his wife's mother is there right now, and the woman comes over who is possessed, and I love this scene where Kinderman just looks behind because he knows something's going to happen. He runs home, he speeds home to get there, and then like that dialogue in his head that he heard from Patient X earlier, where he says like that catatonics was so easy to possess. And then the woman talks in the voice of Patient X, Brad Dourif's voice, and says, "I've been waiting for you to see this, Karis." She pulls out the hedge trimmers, literally puts the hedge trimmers right on her throat. The grandpa grabs Julie's hair and just pulls it right out right before it shuts. And that is terrifying. That is one of the best, another fantastic, I guess, jump scare. But I love the fact that she was, and you see perfectly how close she was to getting clipped. So close, like her throat was right here, and it was right there before it clipped on her throat. That is terrifying, and it doesn't even, and she doesn't even die, but that is terrifying showing that. I love that. And then, this is weird, this is where the ending in the theatrical cut gets really weird, because there's this random priest who just randomly, like he sees a bird, and then he's like, he thinks he gets called to do this exorcism. It's just out of nowhere. Like, why is he? Because this book did not have an exorcism in it. It was not intended to be an exorcist movie, but they made it into an exorcist movie, the studio, and I feel like William Peter Blatty just didn't care. He's like, whatever, we'll just randomly put this priest in there. He'll go and do the exorcism with Kinderman, and he does the exorcism, and whenever Karis, because Karis is part of that, in that body with Patient X, where like the Gemini killer, where Karis finally comes out in the body and he says like, "Do it now, do it, kill me," and then Kinderman shoots him in the head. And that's how it ends, but it's such a different ending than the director's cut, which I just watched, which is really drastically different, and I'll talk about that in that video. But then it just ends on a very quick note, even though I love it, where he shoots Patient X or Karis in the head, and Karis is finally at peace. And it just sees them at the funeral, rain going down, like Kinderman's just watching the grave go down, and then the movie ends. It's kind of abrupt, even though I love it, it's just kind of an abrupt ending. But honestly, watching the director's cut, it's very abrupt too, like way more abrupt, so this movie isn't perfect, but I love this movie just as much as the first two. I think this is a fantastically scary movie with a fantastic performance by George C. Scott. Such an interesting detective story. The kills, you don't see any kills, but the descriptions of them is terrifying. I love the fact that you can watch a scary movie like this and not see any murders. That is incredible. And those hedge trimmers are scary. That weapon, that is freaky. So I love this movie, man. It's so good. I also loved how this movie also took place primarily in the daytime. After the beginning, like it primarily took place in the day. The ending took place in the day. That's really cool. And I thought it was interesting how all three of these end on a bittersweet end. Like the first one, it's like Reagan's not possessed anymore, and she goes away with her mother, and then Kinderman talks to Dyer in the extended cut of The Exorcist. But it's bittersweet. And then Exorcist 2, it's like Lamont and Reagan run away and hide while Gene Tuscan like stays behind and nobody knows where they went. And then in this one, it's like Karis gets killed and is finally at peace again, but Kinderman lost him too, so it's just like, it's bittersweet again. So again, this is another bittersweet one like the other two, which I love those. I love how all three of these are bittersweet in the ending. And I loved how this was just as fantastic as the first two, I thought. I thought this was just incredible. All three of them are so unique and so interesting, and I love this one. I think it's so great. Again, all those points I said, George C. Scott is incredible. This is terrifying without showing any violence. Cinematography is great. The writing is incredible. Visuals are great. Everything about this is fantastic. I love this movie. And that's the theatrical cut I'm going to talk about. So next up, I will talk about the director's cut, which is a drastically different monster than this one. More what William Peter Blatty intended than this one. So next up will be that one, the director's cut of The Exorcist 3. So thank you guys for watching this one. Check out The Exorcist 3 director's cut review, and check out my other stuff. Like, comment, subscribe. Thanks so much for watching.